All right, welcome to lesson number 5 in the VP Culture Science course, where we're training everyone to develop a culture where everyone feels valued. And this lesson is going to be concerning teams plus time equals culture. These are two critical elements that you have to have in order to create a powerful culture. So let's look into this. Now, according to Gallup research, 70% of the differential effects on employee engagement come from the team leaders. So team leaders are the linchpin, and we'll see how the team itself is a critical component of culture. So think of the teams as an organ within the body that make up the whole body. So each organ has to be functioning and for that body to be whole. So the team leader is critical in helping the team and focus the team on the new cultural development that you're trying to do. So we'll see that two component. You need the team and the team leader that causes the team to focus on the cultural development. All right. Difference is on the team level. Okay, so why is that? So one of the things that Marcus Buckingham, a key researcher, showed was that you can have two corporations and they'll test out nearly the same according to Gallup and to Oracle and the research that Marcus Buckingham was doing. But if you look within that organization, you'll see a vast difference between the team quality. So you'll range between high quality team leaders and teams to toxic team leaders and teams. Every organization is going to have team leaders and teams that are lower in that scale and everywhere in between. So what you really want to do as a leader of leaders is to raise the level of these teams to a certain level. So each team leader is usually good intentioned. They're just not trained to do and to lead in a way that leads people towards valuing. According to Rich Karlgaard in his book Team Genius, the ideal size for a group is 5 to 7 and not more than 12. There seems to be research that indicates that our brains are kind of hardwired to be able to track that many people within an organization. And what's interesting is that militaries throughout the centuries have always had this ideal size of group of 5 to 7. That's sort of the squad size, the fire group size in infantry. And the infantries that have high quality groups have great success because it really is, our brains, according to this research, is not capable of keeping track of more than 5 to 7 people. So it's family size, it's squad size. It's the smallest unit that we do and function well in as human beings, according to research. You can get up to 12, but as you grow past 7, your group interactions and leadership to group interactions start to diminish. So this is the ideal size. So this is sort of the cellular level of our interactions as human beings. So you need to have these teams and you need to have high quality leaders. In fact, one of the differences in the Ukraine and Russian war is that Ukraine has high quality, what we call non-commissioned officers, your sergeants, your leaders of squads, whereas Russia doesn't trust their frontline men to make decisions and to do work. So there's this disparity of quality of team cohesion. So it's a very important number and a very important thing to establish within your organizations. If you have weak teams and not clearly designated team leaders, you're going to have a weak culture dispersion because there's no way for you to transmit that from one to one. You need to have a strong team leader, strong teams, and focus of time. So it takes 3 to 5 years of constant intentional focus to start to really create a quality, solid culture that will take root within your organization. So this is not something that you're going to approach with just a single workshop. And that's why we have this approach that we want to have a years-long curriculum that you review again and again to really cement this to the new people that are coming into and the people that are established, so that this becomes rote, this becomes part of your vocabulary, becomes your everyday cultural, emotional current that you're creating within your organization. So be focused on taking the long haul in this. And here's one of the things that I often tell people is where you're focused, you will go. Just like this video here is showing you. I've done mountain biking myself, and it's like wherever you look is where you go. If I start looking off the side of the bridge, boom, I'll knock into the side of the bridge. Or if I'm looking down that cliff where I don't want to go, that's sure enough where you're going to go, and you're going to end up braking and getting off. But you just look where you want to go, you'll go there. So that's the whole principle behind the leadership principle, is that the team is looking where the leader is looking. And if the leader is looking with how he reinforces everything, how he teaches it, and the time that you spend to focus on things, they'll go in that direction. So that's the principle here of focusing people. Now, this is what I often hear is, we don't have time for this. We just don't have time. We're so busy. Well, you're too busy wasting time, unfortunately. If you're not a growth company with growth mindset, meaning if you really want to grow, you have to take time to improve things. Otherwise, things break down and get worse. It's just the way things go, according to research by MIT. So how much time are you wasting? Well, you could be wasting 20% of your time, or you could be gaining 20% of your time. Now, to put that in perspective, that's 1 day a week. You could be losing 1 day a week. So to be a great leader is to focus your energy on valuing people. So you're going to need to at least take 15 minutes or half an hour a week to focus your team on creating culture that is going to be on valuing, because these valuing principles are going to create even more time within your organization over time. So you might have a little initial investment that's going to cause a little bit of dissidence up for people, and they're going to think this isn't working because it has a longer time frame. But as soon as you start to see it working, things will start to improve and start to move towards a better outcome. In fact, for every dollar of time that's invested in a culture program or an improvement program of this nature, you're going to see $4 in outcomes of return on investment. So investing in culture and intrinsic motivations is really going to improve your overall productivity. So it's not a zero-sum game where you lose that 15 minutes. You actually, over time, will gain that time back in spades. So let's look at a few stories. This first story is going to focus on Satya Nadella. He took over the Microsoft Corporation from Bill Gates. So it was a famous transition going on there. And they were focused on very rigid cultural models. They had experts that were considered sacred within their organization. They had rigid models of which they were doing things that had gained them their billions and millions up until then. But the world was changing. It was moving away from floppy disk installed software to cloud computing. And Satya was the one that was critical in pushing their culture, changing their culture, focusing the mind of their culture and every leader on a more cooperative, a more valuing people, so that each individual within those groups felt that they could contribute in psychologically safe ways to the overall outcomes that would improve the bottom line of Microsoft. And he's done a great job in innovating at Microsoft and bringing Microsoft back into the forefront of the software world with things like AI and other innovations that they are leading the way in. So let's look at another organizational story. This one is a story about group victory and how that changes things. So Netflix set up a competition between organizations. They just said, if you can come up with a model that improves our movie recommendation algorithm by 10%, we'll give you $1 million. So a bunch of groups jumped into this. One was from Bell Labs. So it was this relatively small, tight, elite group of 5 or 6 people. But then this other group, a collective of groups within groups, was started to collaborate. And this mega group of very small cells of 5 to 6 people, but again, they had a group of like 10 working all together, 10 of these smaller groups working together. They actually outcompeted the super group with all these highly intelligent, innovative people. So the point is that groups outcompete consistently the power of the individual. So let's look at the science behind this, all right? So the science behind all of this is once again astounding. You've got we as human beings being primarily wired for this kind of group networking. We all have like Wi-Fi built into our brains, and there's these two neuron groups called spindle neurons and oscillator neurons. The thing that's cool about this is that only primates have this. So and only like great apes and us are the ones that have these kind of neurons. And obviously we have more of them in our prefrontal cortex than any other animal on the planet. So we're by nature wired to form teams, to form families, to form groups, and to thrive within those organizations. And so these neurons are constantly attuned to what's going on in the group. Who's the leader of the group? How is it being formed? What do we do? What are the norms? What are the values? Where's the emotional current going within our group? These neurons in our brains are specially created to absorb this and to focus our minds on this. So we as human beings are scientifically wired for this. So to butt against this mentality, to be the Lone Ranger, to do something like this, is to go against the very nature of this mentality within our organizations, within our own brains. So Dr. Lieberman is a social scientist who wrote a book called Social. And his whole premise is that we are wired as human beings to be social. And he did this experiment, again, that proved that the group is far superior to the individual. So they did a long-term experiment where they tested smart individuals against groups that were well connected. So these were groups that had basically the principles that we are talking about of valuing people, good emotional communication, good shared communication, so that everyone within the group has a place to speak and to discuss things. And those groups that could do that were the most powerful groups within the organization. And they outperformed intelligent individuals or disconnected, non-valuing teams. So again, another scientific study that shows that groups, valuing people groups in particular, outperform disconnected groups or individuals. So that leads us to our group questions. What does it feel like to be in a group that focuses on one positive thing, like winning a game? We've all experienced that in our lives. So what does that feel like to be in a team like that? Discuss that question. The next question. So question number 2, how do people close to you shape your personal culture, like your family and your friends? What are their attitudes and connections and emotional connections? How does that shape you when you interact with those people, your personal culture with those people? So discuss that question. And our final question, if you took 15 minutes a week to focus your mind and improve your mood and productivity, how would that make you feel? So those are our 3 questions for this group discussion this week. And that wraps up our lesson on teams plus time equals culture. Has been our focus that you have to have strong teams, strong team leaders that focus intentionally on where you're going in creating a VP culture where everyone feels valued. So that's lesson number 5 for this week in our culture science course. And we look forward to seeing you next week in next lesson number 6.